Great. Thank you, Mary, for this introduction and for the invitation as well. It's wonderful to be here and to share the first findings or the state of play report that we produced within the IIRC. I did prepare a few slides, and I think the report was sent to you in kind of a pre-read or in the invitation as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. So I'm the recently appointed chair of this integrated thinking and strategy group, but that is more or less my hobby. So my day-to-day job is where I know Bill is at ABN AMRO, where I've been working for over 20 years now, and the last 7 or 8 years on our integrated report and integrated thinking and sustainability efforts. A bit of advertising here. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock Central European Time, we'll be publishing our 2019 report, which is an integrated report. It's an impact report, the second impact report. It's a human rights update. It's non-financial disclosures. And we, for those of you who are not familiar with the concept, we follow the core and more approach. And we've even developed an app to push all our reports onto your mobile phone. So that's ABN AMRO. I'll stop on that side, but it's that is like my day job. And since about 6 months, I've been active as chair of the integrated thinking and strategy group for the IIRC. And I've taken over from the wonderful Jyoti Banerjee. For those of you, a lot of you know him probably, or he's quite famous in this space. And Jyoti and Christian Heller from BASF were the former chairs of this group, and they actually developed a lot of the content for the state of play report that I'm now about to present or to share the highlights of in this webinar. So the state of play was designed over about the last 2 to 2.5 years. We did a lot of case studies. I was part of the group from ABN AMRO perspective. We had around 40 companies participating in this special interest group, and 6 partner organizations as well, like A4S, Said Business School, the Capitals Coalition, and a few others, which has been great. And what we were trying to develop or to investigate or to study is how integrated thinking actually works within companies. And the title of the report, so the fact that we call this a state of play report, is very intentional. It's really meant just to present where we are now, because we're definitely not there yet, and we need to do more research. We need companies to develop this further, and we will actually, our ambition is to publish another report at the end of this year, or maybe early next year, with some new findings. But for now, this is the state of play, and on this slide you'll see a short overview. On the right, you see a picture, I think it's from Future Fit, that a lot of you will know as well. But the idea is that the current scenario is characterized by stakeholder capitalism, and that is a good thing, because it means that there's a broader set of issues, more than just financial. I like to call them pre-financial performance. There's a broader set of stakeholders, not just investors or shareholders. So there's society, as we've introduced society as a stakeholder over the last couple of years. And nature could be considered a stakeholder, depending on the type of organization. And there's this concept of short, medium, and long term, as opposed to just the short-term results. Okay, so this leads to a new understanding of value and where value creation and destruction are considered throughout the entire value chain. I don't think I'm mentioning anything new here. Most of you involved in the integrated reporting space will have heard of all these concepts. So it's just giving an idea from where we are. If you combine all this, or this thinking into an organization, or integrated thinking into any company, then, and if you look at the original string model, or I wasn't allowed, I always call it the Octopus, but I know some IIRC people who are really against that term, so I'll try and avoid that for now. But we all know what we mean, the original string model, and actually combine all these capitals and add in the concept of time. Then we came up with some concept that is called a spring, and it's a never-ending spring. So it's not. Some people have characterized it as kind of a heartbeat, and at the end of the heartbeat, the patient or the organization has died. That's not what we intended. We intended to keep going. And to gain a momentum as you push the spring together. So that is the visual representation. I don't know if you know them over in the US, but Black Sun has, as a design company and a consultancy company, has helped us a lot with the development of the model and the design. So I'll just read some of the highlights on this sheet. So the capitals that a company deploys allow it to create value. The value can be seen to have impacts on those same resources that were used in the inputs. And in a model with multiple inputs and multiple impacts, we can see multiple strings in operation. That is the essence here. But in a world of integrated thinking, we don't just want individual strings. We want the capitals and their impacts to be considered together and to be evaluated together. That is the essence of the spring model. And if you put that into a visualization, then you get this concept of the spring. So the challenge then for management is to make the spring as effective as possible and enabling the company to create value. That is the challenge. And on this next slide, you will see it in a bit of a bigger picture. But the idea is to see these impacts and these capitals together, where also if I'm looking at a lot of integrated reports or a lot of people working on integrated reports, we try and split those impacts per capital and monetize them or assess the impact. But the essence of integrated thinking is at least at board level and at strategy level, you try and to consider these capitals all combined. Put that into a table and you get and you add the different developments over the last couple of years, and try to identify the differences between string and spring. These are some of the examples that you would get. It's not limited to just these four, but you could say that the management goal would move from maximizing profit or maximizing profit on a single capital to optimizing value. If you look at capital focus, just from financial capital to multi-capital. And the timing is, well, it actually says short-term and long-term, but we even mean short, medium, and long-term here. And it would allow the company to move from a reactive to a more proactive position and behavior. So this is the ideal situation if you, and we've studied a lot of these companies, various companies across different sectors. And you see that if they perform really well or have more experience on the concept of integrated thinking, then these developments on the right, so the value, the optimizing value, multi-capital, different time frames, and a proactive behavior will become more apparent. So the next steps, it's not the full description of the report that I put into these slides, but the most of our insights came from case studies with actual companies, and we intend to move that forward in the next few months or in the next year actually, and we've developed a new case study template. That will make it easier for us to compare the performance of different companies or different organizations. And we've identified some sample companies from different sectors mainly based in Europe. Not to offend anyone, but we do feel that some European companies are more ahead of the curve with regards to integrated thinking. So it's interesting for us to study those. And our goal is also to differentiate between different sectors. This is something that we haven't done so far. We've just studied a lot of companies, but now we feel that we're going to study a few sectors, and then within those sectors we'll find the most mature companies. And this is what it will look like. So various industries based on relevance. We want the case studies to be user friendly, or to be to actually be quite light at the beginning. So the in-depth analysis will be done by people working at the IIRC. And we hope to find some collective findings to be able to develop a maturity mapping on where companies are. This will also include some sort of a self-assessment where companies think that they are. And we hope to develop what we now call the pathway to integrated thinking, but could turn out just to be some guiding tools for companies starting on the journey. This leads me into, I think, my final slide already. So we're working on this maturity mapping. It's definitely not been done yet. We've just sent out invitation to 4 companies where we want to start the case studies with, and also to check if this new template is really working. And we hope to be working on a model that will help organizations towards integrated thinking. And as I said in the beginning, our goal is to share a new report probably at the end of the year. My feeling for now is that that will be another state of play report. It will not be a final report because developments in this field are evolving constantly. So it would be a little bit strange to present a final report when you know that once it's published, it's already been overtaken by some new companies. So this is very briefly what we have done, the highlights, I think, of the State of Play report and what we intend to do within the special interest group for this year. And let me just open it up to any questions or comments or feedback that you may have.
Anyone want to jump in? I'll start off, Tjeerd. I haven't been familiar with this idea of the spring, and I still have a hard time kind of conceptualizing it. How do you think it helps people think about these things, think in a more integrated manner?
Well, and I see Ralph now here as well. Hi, Ralph. Good to see you there. I pushed the wrong button just before, but no. So what we're hoping is that companies that are more developed or more experienced in this concept of integrated reporting and actually using it to drive their thinking, or the other way around, that they will think of the capitals not as individual capitals, but actually think of them as a combined set of value creators that is creating value for a company. And we tried not to, or we really tried to avoid, because that was not our intention, to have critique on the let's say on the string model, or on the, I'll mention it once more, the Octopus model, but to see that, just to demonstrate that companies performing on an integrated thinking level, they actually see these capitals in a combined state, and that is where the spring kind of popped to mind. At least it originated, as mentioned, in Jyoti's mind, and it really worked for a lot of these companies, and they related to it as well. So that's how we came up with it.
Just curious. It's funny how the visuals tend to, I think, take on a lot of importance at this stage, just because we're all trying to conceptualize ways to think, right? So
Definitely.
So I know we have people, a lot of great thinkers, a lot of practitioners on the line. Please jump in. Questions, comments, observations.
Mary, this is Bill Bowie.
Yep, welcome, Bill.
Great. Thank you, Mary, for hosting this, and thank you, Tjeerd, for presenting. I guess I just wanted to make one comment, sort of in support of recognizing where you're going, and then one question. One is, I mean, I'm a little, the string to spring, I've always thought of the octopus, and I get to say octopus because I'm not under the IIRC, although it does have, of course, 12 legs. But, you know, the outside of that is the sort of the arrow that goes round and round. So I guess the thing that's a little bit odd for me is I've never thought of that as a string, but rather as sort of a cycle. And, you know, we at R3.0, Ralph and I are working on a value cycles blueprint right now. So exploring that idea of cycles. But what I do see in the spring that it sounds promising is the idea that it adds kind of a spiral element to it. That a spring is sort of wound up in a spiral. And there's been some support for that idea that, you know, actual business developments can happen in both cyclical and spiral ways. So, you know, this is by way of saying, I'm interested to see where the thinking goes and how it gets fleshed out further. And I do see some potential for this spring idea to get some more flesh on the bone, so to speak. The question that I've got is more around the question of, you know, we've been exploring at R3.0 the sort of state of the play being around impact valuation, and you mentioned monetization earlier. And, you know, we see that as a stepping stone towards a more advanced or developed approach around system value, the concept that Jeff Kendall from Future Fit has coined, and I think is sort of in the process of being developed. So I guess I'd be interested in hearing what the committee's deliberations have been around sort of two issues in there. One, the question of valuation or monetization, and you know, what role that plays in integrated thinking. Is it sort of necessary, or you know, something that could be chosen by the company to pursue or not? And then also whether you're at all integrating the notion of system value into it.
Thanks for that, Bill, and great questions. I'll try and answer them from the special interest group perspective. So not so much from my ABN AMRO perspective, which you are very familiar with. And just to differentiate between those two, because the rest of the audience may not be. So at ABN AMRO, we're very active in this impact valuation and monetization bit per capital, and trying to assess and monetize the impacts per capital, referring to the report that will be published tomorrow again. But for the integrated thinking and for the spring model, we actually said that our main focus was on the combining of these values. To look at it, I'm trying to avoid the word, but why should I? The holistic view of these total combined capitals in terms of optimizing value creation over time. What could help in that sense is all these developments that are going on monetization or impact valuation or impact measuring, or, well, there's different words, but we kind of, I think our intention is the same. The focus here is more on the integrated thinking part that is behind the long-term creation of value. How should these different capitals be viewed in combination or as a whole. And this is where strategy comes in. An integrated strategy would work. Measurement would not so much, I think measurement would be hindered by the Spring model, because these capitals or these valuations, they kind of lose, they lose their sense of direction if you add them all up, right? If we add up natural capital and social capital and put them into one number, then they've lost their meaning in a certain sense. So that is not the intention here to represent in any way that the Spring model or the combination of capitals should be viewed as a simple math equation or a math exercise to add up different impacts. It is a viewpoint of long-term value creation across or in combination of with a combination of more of the capitals. I want to refer to your first point, actually, the feedback loop in the IIRC model. I kind of agree with you there that it is missing, because it's very valuable to go back to your inputs and to see how you have improved your value creation. So I'm definitely gonna take that into account in the review this year to see if we can improve on that. And your last question was on system value. I think we've not studied that as much in this report so far. We've been looking at individual organizations and their performance on integrated thinking, less their impact on systems or systemic value creation, or whatever words we would put to that. So I think that could be something to study this year.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tjeerd. That was helpful. And I'll just mention very briefly that we at R 3.0 are concurrently working with the IIRC on a multi-capitalism paper that looks at the especially what we call the carrying capacities of the capitals, or integrates the ecological and social thresholds that people might be familiar with from Kate Raworth's donut, or the planetary boundaries, or what have you. And so that's sort of the thinking that goes into the idea of system value, is that it would be looking, taking a step beyond impact valuation and look at the value that's created as it is within the donut, so to speak. So, but I think that's something that we may present on to this community. We're in conversation with Mary about presenting on that potentially later. It's still in first draft form, but and I'll end by saying I'm looking forward to seeing your report tomorrow, Tjeerd. I know how hard you work on it and what a good job you're doing. So I'll keep an eye out on my inbox for that.
Thanks, Will.
Other questions, comments? You want to? Oops, I see one in the chat. So Elizabeth, you can feel free to chime in if you want.
Okay, I just was waiting for the right time. I would love to see, I wonder if you've given thought to how the IR model could be connected to community well-being indicators. And here in the United States, there's a model called the community capitals model, and they use the metaphor of spiraling up. And one of the promising things that I love about IR is it could be used at multiple levels. Like you could use this at the individual level to do an employee development. You could use it for the organization, of course, but also at the community level to show how the capitals create these synergistic effects across the levels. And I wondered if you're thinking about that for your next strategy paper.
That's one of the reasons probably that we are trying to differentiate between sectors, because if you look at well-being as a driver or as a metric or as an indicator of value creation, I think that will differ probably per industry on how to integrate that into the thinking of organizations or into the steering of organizations in terms of value creation. So one of the improvements that we are trying to make this year is to be more sector-based or sector-focused, and I'm hoping that this will come up, or I'm expecting it actually to come up. It didn't come up last year as much because we were quite focused on how has integrated thinking or integrated reporting impacted the strategy. That I think that was more on an, let's say, on a managerial level or on a board level of an organization. And if we were to see the impact of well-designed integrated thinking or well-designed integrated strategies on an outcome level, you would have to look at well-being as a, well, I think it would be trying to think, would it be an outcome or an impact? It would probably be an impact, if I'm totally correct in my value creation models. But it would be interesting to see if there are certain sectors that consider well-being to be a good driver or a good metric of a good integrated thinking and strategy design principle for a company. I would guess it had to be. Yeah.
Well, one of my heroes actually is Jenny Norris at the Indiana Society of CPAs, and it's fascinating to me the great job they've done with their integrated reporting, because they seem to have connected the business world with the community world in a very strategic way. Jenny, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you just released your new your integrated report, and I was wondering if maybe you could speak on that.
Jenny, you might have to unmute yourself. I'll try to unmute her. I don't know. See. Nope, she's got herself muted.
She may not be in a place where she...
I'm sorry, I was actually away from my desk for a minute and I missed what the question was. I apologize for that.
We were talking about how the community or the integrated reporting multi-capitals, the strategy is so brilliant because it can connect to larger well-being indicators. And your report I really hold out as a model for how you've done such a brilliant job connecting strategy to these larger community benefits. And I also find your organization fascinating because here you are, these very accountancy-minded CPAs, and yet you're a nonprofit organization, and you found a way to blend these two worlds through integrated reporting.
Yeah, and to me that was one of the cool things about this type of reporting was you could do that. And I think to me it's a great way to tell our value creation story. It's so much more effective to say, hey, we're doing this because it doesn't just help us, but it helps the community as a whole. It helps whoever our stakeholder is that we want to talk about. And it just fits perfectly, I think, in terms of what we do.
What, Tjeerd, you may not be familiar with it, Tjeerd. We should make sure that we get you a copy of what the Indiana Society of CPAs has been doing. We had a program with them earlier, maybe last year, late last year. But they've set a great example for the U.S.
Yeah, please send it to me. I look forward to it.
Yeah, we also have Katie from Intel on the line. Katie, if you want to share, no pressure, but Intel is also the first U.S. company to have a separate page where they report on each of their capitals in their 10K, which is unprecedented in the U.S. So.
Yeah, I'll just speak briefly about it. We have a section that we added in 2018 on the integrated capitals framework, and it has a summary on the capitals, and then we go into detail as to how each capital connects into our strategy and the value that it creates. In 2019, our report, we just kept trying to emphasize an effort on bringing more information that investors are requesting, specifically around corporate responsibility, and really trying to expand on that value creation piece and the so what for investors and the readers of our report. And that's where we feel like we really added some benefit this year in, you know, really summarizing how each of the capitals work together to create value and show that not just in 2018, but in the years leading up to 2019, how we can really see the value driving over time, especially when we look at how those capitals are working together to do that. Yeah, and this is from our 2018 report here.
Yep. So for here in the States, we were especially excited about this, to see this kind of presentation in a 10K.
Yeah, and kind of in line with the conversation here, you know, we had to look primarily to international filers in our benchmarking for this to get some ideas as to, you know, how we could bring this into the report. And we're continuing to try and build on this each year and improve it.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, I have seen this report before, and I know it. So well, maybe not for today, but the question that we are, as a group, that we are trying to study is how has this affected decision making at a company level? How has it affected the strategy process? So the link between the integrated reporting debates and the integrated thinking debates are actually usually at board level or at decision making level, but can we really say that the capitals have been taken into account in certain decision making, in the steering of an organization, or in the concept of value creation? And for a lot of organizations on the journey, let's say, of integrated reporting and integrated thinking, that's not yet the case, or they are on the journey towards integrated thinking, which is fine. There's no right or wrong there, but it was, for us, it was interesting to study, or it still is interesting to study, to see if these different capitals have really found their way into the strategy of a company, and can we find any evidence that that they are part of, well, maybe not day to day, but let's say strategic decisions that are being made. And this is very challenging to study. But if we find evidence of it, or if we find companies that are outperforming on it, usually because they have taken some sort of, the usual driver is often the sustainability angle, or the natural capital kind of process, or something. It's usually one capital that has kind of a dominant entry into strategic decision making, but we also see some companies that have been on this journey longer and can demonstrate a real integrated strategy, which is really interesting.
Cool. I brought up Tjeerd, my favorite, since I took control of the screen. I hope you don't mind. I brought up this page from your state of play report that I put that system value graphic into context. So I'll leave that up for the time being, if that's okay.
Sure.
Anyone else want to jump in? Questions, comments?
Ralph, go ahead, Ralph. I see you waving, but you need to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yes, I just did. I was just brave to wait until I'm asked. I think I want to just share my observation. When I first look at String and Spring, I had huge difficulties in really getting what it should say or what it tells me. And we, of course, also look at it from our developments, our 3.0, and, you know, our sort of staggered approach, where we look at the nano level, the personal level, the micro level, which is the organizational level. Then we talk about a meso level, which is industries, its habitats, its portfolios, and then the systemic level, the macro level. And impact is a very, very interesting thing to look at. And more what we observe really when we think about what would a regenerative and distributive economy look like, is that impacts all occur in the habitat level. or in the meso level when you talk about habitats, where industries and from a financial perspective, portfolios serve the needs of the different habitats and the impacts in these habitats. And when you look at, you can just take the Corona example now, when we look at how resilience will going to be achieved in the future, I think the discussion that we're going to have is globalization really the right model? Would we not better look at regional and bioregional habitats as the unit of measurement? And that of course is interesting from the perspective of how to describe impact. So I was always in favor of the IIRC model because it was the only one that really took the multi-capital idea forward, although it didn't really enforce it very much. It was all the focus on the business model, the middle piece of the so-called octopus. And now we're going back to the periphery, and where it becomes more and more important to understand these capitals, the interrelations of these capitals, and what impact that interrelation of these different capitals have. And I would say I am mostly interested in habitats, because this is where, for us, the unit of measurement more and more occurs to be the most valuable one. So at this moment, the IIRC really looks at things from the micro perspective, mainly the impact on the different capitals that the organization is connected to. And I just want to bring in that point that there is this other focus, which the IIRC could also look at. So not so much the inside out perspective, but also the outside in perspective of what impacts did we have through the interrelated use of capitals in different habitats. So that's a different component that then also bridges the idea towards a better understanding of the creation of system value, which Bill has also already talked about. So I'm actually in favor, or very much interested, to look at that spring model more from the outside in perspective than the inside out perspective. So that's the observation that I have that might be interesting to be discussed further in your working group, in how far that is an area of interest, because this is I'm not so much interested in the different outcomes on capitals. I'm interested really on the impact of those capitals on the different habitats, because that might become the major unit of measurement in the future when you look at how you connect micro, meso, and macro level. So
yeah, thanks for that, Ralph. I am quite familiar of the work that, well, R3.0 is doing in that.
Of course you are, yeah.
Just to be clear on the let's say the scope of work that we are doing in this integrated thinking group, it's not to redesign IIRC models or to replace IIRC models or to move away from all the work that is being done by various organizations on impact measurement, value, well, on all this sort of stuff. What we try to study is actually, can we find evidence of truly integrated thinking, integrated decision-making, integrated strategies at board level or at senior management level, at decision-making within those companies. That is not to move away from the importance of real impact in the real economy at all these different levels as an, well, not so much as an outcome, but as an impact on the world at all these different levels that you just described. What we try to study is, can we find evidence or can we see any best practices from within the organization, so within companies that are sometimes moving on the journey of integrated reporting to actually embed integrated thinking into their decision making. And ultimately, I think we are very much on the same page that should lead to less negative and more positive impact on on society, on system value, etc. But for the studies that we did here and the studies that we are performing this year, we are, well, I would be hesitant to say we are simply, because it's far from simple, but a lot of this work usually is. But our scope is geared towards senior decision makers, strategy developers within organizations, hopefully, and we are hoping to discover not a sort of a holy grail, but to discover evidence on how can we influence or support other boards or other companies to integrate this multi-capital thinking, impact thinking into their decision making. So it's kind of a smaller piece of the puzzle maybe than the total ambition of IIRC and other organizations. It's looking into this concept of can we integrate these capitals into the decision making of senior management within organizations, and which organizations are outperforming in this. So that is we're always looking for best practices and best examples on this, and that's what we'll continue this year.
That's great. Thanks, Tjeerd. Any other questions, comments? Feel free to raise your hand or unmute.
Going back to the topic, I don't know if this is sensitive, it sounds like it might be, but I'm just curious, what is the objection to the Octopus model? I use it in my class and my students love it. They really can get their minds around it. I'll think about introducing the string because I love the idea of the weaving together. That's another metaphor that I use, but I just am curious, why is Octopus objectionable?
No. So I'm the last person to criticize the Octopus model. I love it a lot. I use it a lot as well. It's really helpful. The idea behind Spring was more if you want to visualize the concept of integrated thinking, then you should not view as the capitals as being something separate. They are intertwined, or they cannot be viewed as different capitals. If you want to assess impact and want to understand the value creation model of a company, or you want to explain it into in an integrated report or in any other fashion, then the Octopus model works really well, because you can just follow the capitals. They lead you through the business model and etc. So that works really well. If you want to encourage integrated thinking, then they should be viewed as more, I don't always like the term holistic, but let's say combined capitals.
Okay, so it's more the notion of the separateness that people, but you know, teaching organizational leadership from a manager's perspective, it's good to know, like, what are these different ingredients? If you think of value creation as a recipe, what are the different levers you can pull? And so when you talk about strategic decision making, one of the big shifts that I think has been helpful is students start to see, oh, human resources, for example, it's not a cost center. It's really the investment in your future value creation capacity. So that's how I think.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. So human capital is a value driver. It's not a cost center. It's a value driver, but it should be viewed holistically. And it should, if you look at the board of a company, it's not 6 capitals sitting around the table, right? It's not finance and someone for social and someone for human resource. Also, a chief human resource officer should be viewing these capitals together. And when boards or senior managers are developing strategies or making major decisions for organizations, they shouldn't, it would be nice to study the capitals individually, but it should be viewed as a holistic system of value creation. But it helps to untwine them, or to, right, it really helps the understanding of the capitals, But the power of the integrated thinking is if you are able to combine them and to see them as a total set that can be used to steer a company.
So I hope this isn't getting too geeky, but just a question kind of to all of you. Is Werner Alle's value network analysis relevant to this? As we're talking about this, my head just is going back to Werner Alle. I don't know if anybody's familiar with her book and her approach. I've been really frantically trying to find something on my computer on the internet. I'll share it with the group because her value network, she wrote a book, and I think she's retired now, but say 15 years ago, and talked about that rather than value being the stock, that it's a flow, and that value flows between stakeholders. And she talked about tangible and intangible flows. But when I think of the capitals, I think of this complex network of flows among different stakeholders, and you know, we understand them as contributing or taking away from the stocks of the different capitals, but those flows are you know, the spiral up, the spiral down, the in, the out. It's a really, I think, a really helpful way to think about it. So I'll see if I can dig something up. I don't know, it may be too much to try to do a program on it, but I'm not seeing any nods from anybody that they're familiar with that, or?
No, I don't know. Please share it.
Okay, I will. Anyone else? So one thing I would ask, Tjeerd, that the paper was rich with quite a few examples. I don't know if there are any off the top of your head, or I can bring it up and we can flip through some of the concrete examples about how companies, you saw evidence of integrated thinking through their reporting, really, right?
Yeah, we shared, well, not only through the reporting, also through interviews and so in the case studies that we did, for instance, we did one on Solvay, which is a Belgian chemical company that has really embarked on a journey of, let's say, integrating natural capital into their decision making. And this has been, well, they've been at it for years and years, and they finally feel that quite comfortable in saying, okay, so in terms of decision making and in terms of strategy development at Solvay, natural capital is really being viewed at when making big decisions, which was interesting. We also did a case study for Schiphol, the Dutch airport company, that had a lot of emphasis on value creation for other stakeholders and not just the investor, because it's a state-owned company, but they really take value creation for different stakeholder groups quite seriously into their thinking at board level. Which was great to see. We did one on World Bank, case study on World Bank, which I'm guessing all of you know, but it's very interesting to find the characteristics that World Bank uses to make investment decisions and to see how the different capitals are represented at decision-making level there. There's a lot of other case studies into the report. We did a smaller one, I think, on HSBC, which was interesting to see a big mainstream bank embedding or on the journey, as they would say it, of integrated thinking. They're far from perfect yet. We did some work with ING, with BASF, with ABN AMRO. I think those were the biggest case studies that we did. And as I said, we looked at the elements of success, or the elements of the positive elements of any evidence of integrated thinking in those organizations, which varied immensely. So it was difficult to compare, and was also difficult to draw any conclusions based on, let's say, just 10 or 12 case studies. So we do feel we need to research this more. And for those of you who are interested, the case studies are all available through the IIRC website as well.
Great. Comments, questions? I know we have Maureen Klein is on the line. Maureen's going to be presenting to us next month about Pirelli. I don't know if you want to chime in on anything, Maureen.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi. Welcome.
Oh, hi. Thank you. This is fascinating, and I'm feeling daunted about presenting next time.
Oh,
because
we like concrete examples too. We got a little geeky this month.
Yeah, this is great, and this is clearly the future, or at least of companies that are going to go in that direction, which I hope more and more will do. So yeah, thank you. I don't have anything to add to the conversation at this time.
Okay, well, I just thought I'd give people a little preview. Maureen's been in sustainability and this space on the journey, integrated journey, as it were, for a long time. So it'll be fun to hear your experiences next month. So thanks, Maureen.
Well, Pirelli is an example of a European company, as Tjeerd was saying. Often it's easier in Europe, or European companies have been on the journey a little longer. So I can talk about that. And I'm not sure how far advanced we are, but I can get in a little bit of the nuts and bolts and challenges to doing this.
Cool. Well, Tjeerd, any last comments, questions for us? Is there anything we can do to support this effort and the integrated thinking?
There is, and you've done some of that in this webinar already. So if you have any other comments, suggestions, or feedback on the State of Play report, please send them to me. And we're also always curious if there's any companies that you feel are truly demonstrating this concept of integrated thinking. It doesn't have to be a great integrated report. I'm always personally interested in great integrated reports, but for this study, we would be looking for companies that that are at the forefront of integrated thinking. And we feel that we have some in scope, but I'm quite sure that with the network in this webinar and the knowledge that you all have, you could come up with some very good suggestions for us to do a case study on. So feedback on the report and suggestions for case studies are always welcome. My contact details should be in here somewhere, and otherwise Ralph and Bill and Mary will know how to find me.